Is it frozen for anyone else as well? I don't have any audio from you yet either.
Okay, so sorry, I am back again.
No problem.
Okay.
That's cool.
Okay. Should I introduce again?
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Let's just take it from there and see where we can go. And then maybe really quickly, Masafumi, if I don't know, maybe if you want, if there's no audio working, if you want to type anything, then I can say it out loud or anything like that. I'm not sure if anyone else has any other solutions they can think of. That, but let me know, and then we can work with it and try to adjust. So yeah, Siravith, why don't you take it away?
Yes. Okay. My name is Siravith. I am trombone player from Chastity Ensemble, and I also work in the area of traditional orchestra, traditional chamber, and also interest in contemporary music as well. And I live in Bangkok. Yes.
Great. And are you zooming in from Bangkok right now? Are you there right now in this call?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. So I was wondering if the name of our talk is Sound Installation and Multimedia. How that and the use of technology may or may not play into your creative practices. And if it does, how maybe it, expands, directs, or enhances, or potentially even limits that practice. If you have any thoughts on that, I don't know if Mauro, you would like to go first on that.
Yes. So, as I mentioned in my work, I don't work with fixed media so often, and also not so often with electronics, but I do very often feel like it's a sound installation from the point of view how the audience interacts with the pieces. So that there are often site-specific pieces, so something is happening in a place, and the people move around it or move with the musicians. Also, the piece that we will be trying to attempt to do tomorrow at TNMAS is one where the musicians move, and there are 5 performers, 4 of which have a wood block and 1 has a megaphone, and the one with the megaphone is kind of a guide slash photographer slash kind of just instructor of, and he reads a text, and the audience normally kind of follows with him around. Now, I know from what I've heard that in the venue, this possibility also with COVID is a bit limited, of course, at the moment, but in general, this piece would stretch over 100 or 150 meters, so that at a certain point, the the performers are far away from each other. So to come back to the idea of the sound installation, what I found interesting about sound installations in general is that they give an audience member their very own access to something that is kind of fixed. And in my piece, I feel a bit the same, like thanks to this huge distance, depending on where the member of audience stands, they're going to hear a different piece because of the speed of sound, like because the patterns that are very tightly knit. But when they're far apart, they're going to sound completely different if you're standing on one side or on the other side of the room. And that's the kind of the small differences that because we're in music, make a big difference. And this is what, so this is my aspect to sound installation. As for multimedia, it's maybe a more kind of, whatever I need, I take kind of approach. I don't have a fetish for certain things or for certain technicalities.
Great. So the audience is free to move anywhere within the boundaries throughout the piece? Yeah.
Yeah, tomorrow, yes, because of the restrictions. Normally, the idea is that this fifth performer who is on the megaphone is kind of a guide, so that they kind of stay close with them. And at a certain point in the piece, so the piece is called My Social Muscle, and it's a piece where the performers create a kind of a musical muscle that contracts and decontracts over the area. And about in the middle of the piece or somewhere, there's a moment where all musicians stand still in place and play a stationary pattern over a large distance. And at that moment, the guide kind of invites the audience to move freely wherever they like wanna. Because by moving freely, they kind of create the pattern actually, because the sound moves with 0.2 or 0.3. For it to travel 100 meters, it takes 0.3 seconds, right? With the speed of sound, more or less. So with this pattern distributed over such a big distance, by moving freely, they kind of create their own piece. But it's only in one moment in the piece. In the other one, they're kind of invited to more stay with this guide. But then again, I mean, we're going to perform this in Lucerne in April and I think we're going to play it 6 times. And I've done performances like this before, and the experience shows that people just do whatever they want, you know. So they might also just kind of go wherever, and which is fine too. Like, it's not a kind of a rigid, like, this is the only place you can experience a piece kind of situation, but it's kind of a recommendation to follow the guide. A bit like tourists, when one gets lost, yeah, all right, it's his problem. He still sees the city, but the ones who are with the guide are going to get the story more direct.
Yeah. So if the megaphone is intended to direct people and act as a guide, what is the woodblock?
The woodblocks are the muscle. They're kind of this musical muscle that it's the most basic, the most not boring. I like the sound of the woodblock, but it has absolutely. It's like an on-off kind of sound almost, right? You hit it, or in the case of this piece, My Social Muscle, they also have a rasp stick, so they rasp it with a rasp stick, and that's about it. Like, there's not more actions on the woodblock, and it's really just a signal kind of thing. An on-off instrument, so to speak. Yeah.
Cool. And then. Siravith, I'm curious to know what your thoughts on the question of how you see and use technology, sound installation, multimedia, perhaps in your practice. And I'm especially curious about your perspective on this as a performer and a trombonist.
Okay, from my point of view, like this morning we just this one piece by John Eagle. I think from your question is this about the developing the sensation of perceive any material or any source that's come to the performer. For example, like in the John Eagle piece, there has a noise, they have a sound that from electronic, and also at the same time there has a sound from the players. And in the notation he mentioned that player has to find the sound from the electronic while they have the many activities happen at the same time. So I found out that with nowadays the multimedia and electronic help us a lot in developing the sensation of listening and seeing. And the important thing is about awareness, also the reaction about what you should react at that time, at that moment, to synchronize together with everything that happened at the same time.
And do you find performing in different formats affects maybe the way you practice, the way you think about your instrument and the sounds, you know, like if you know you're going to be playing a piece where you're walking around, like if you're playing Mauro's piece, right, where you know you're going to start here, someone's going to speak with the megaphone, go over there, you might practice that piece differently than a chamber piece where you have, you know, notated octaves and runs and scales and stuff, or do you kind of approach both those pieces in the same way?
I think it's very interesting one because as a performer, the rehearsal and the performance might not be the same every time. So even you no matter how you rehearse, surprisingly, you might in the performance it might be entirely different. So the most important thing I think is to really pay attention and concentrate on which sound you perceive and which sound you produce back to that.
Great. Masafumi, should we try let's see if we have sound again? So I think you are muted on Zoom right now. Do you want to try to unmute and see if we can hear you? No. I'm sorry about that. I can't say as long as you can hear me. I checked out some of your work beforehand, and I think it would be perfect for the multimedia portion of this conversation, combining video and electronics, especially your series, the Festival of Things themselves, where you're working as a performer and also have the video. I saw one with a painter up there. So combining these areas of installation, multimedia art, performance, composition. And I think that those are all exciting things coming together in your upcoming piece in this festival. I'm curious to see how those play out and work in that sense. So one thing I'm wondering for the other members is the type of artist concepts and devices active in your work. So where you take influences and maybe how those are reflected. I don't know if Mauro, you want to start with that one?
Sure. It's a good question. I mean, I've for my work, I have like a mix of influences, I guess, as all of us. Most important is reading books, reading articles, reading poetry, and then the other very important is just experiment, kind of. Well, but that's not really inspiration. I guess that's already creation. But the one inspiration kind of main channel is reading and then visual arts. So kind of like get a lot of ideas, a lot of concepts, a lot of ways to do things. I get from visual arts, from performance art, from artist friends of mine, from collaboration with artists. It's for me this by far the most, apart from reading, by far the most kind of fruitful, kind of nurturing kind of relationships.
Yeah. I also saw you were curious in the relationship between perception and memory, and you also said the score and sound. Yeah, I don't know if you could maybe explain that a little bit and kind of yeah, for any listeners, what that might mean in theory and also in practice for you.
So I often work with stage environments that are perceptory based. What does it mean? It means that often I write scores that are not like every note written out and then you play the note as a musician, but that it's instructional scores or kind of hybrid scores where part of it are instructionals, and those instructions are perceptory based. That means that the musicians listen to a certain thing or they look at a certain thing on stage, and then this becomes part of their playing. For example, they would have this is a very simple example that I use quite often, is two players are in unison or in almost unison, and there is a differential beating between the two. And then this differential beating, one of them listens to it and then takes this differential beating and makes it the tempo of a new part.
Cool.
This can be very slow. I mean, it cannot be very, very slow because then it's not controllable anymore, but it can be something like 60 or 50 or something. And then it can also be very fast, like, I don't know, 200, 300. So it becomes more of a, not the tempo of the normal beat, but more of a gesture or something like this. So this is something that I've been working with since very, very long, since my studies in Zurich and Graz, that I've just always been in love with. I still use it because I think it's so much fun to use. And so that would be a very simple example. Then other examples is a perceptory-based instruction that deals more with imitation of a whole phrase or a whole melody. So I made some study pieces first. One is called A Song Travels the World, where I improvised a little melody. I recorded myself singing, and I'm just like kind of pretty random what I did. And it's some 15 seconds. And I sent it to a friend and told her, like, can you please imitate that and record yourself? Which she did. And then I took her recording and sent it to somebody else. And that person did the same. And this person sent it on, and so on. And in the end, there was a row of 25 people who each imitated each other's melody, every time changing it a little bit because they did it from memory. And that then became a tape piece that we played in concert. Now, this principle of imitation I use also on stage, where people pass on a melody while the other ones cover their ears and then listen to the new version, then imitate it, and so on. So it's the idea to make musical memory and how people remember music, to make this visible and or audible in this sense. And these processes of falsification, of recomposition, of like to basically make the mistakes, make them not mistakes anymore, but make them something that is actually maybe fun or beautiful, or just becomes part of the piece naturally without being flagged as this is not the original anymore, but like kind of the natural change of music in memory becomes the piece. And so this is something that I'm using quite often too, and voila.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking that in the context of like the title of this with the like sound installations and sound art, and I'm thinking things that kind of make evident acoustic phenomena or our, I don't know, perceptual faculties, seems to be like a classic move of sound art, like beating and taking that phenomena and then making that the basis for a work. And this kind of seems to be a compositional framework to make that sort of musical move of putting that there. I also have a incoming message from Masafumi that regarding the last question, speaking about his piece, Festival of Things in Themselves, saying that there's not boundaries between each medium, but there is only one fundamental action, the fundamental performance, where no additional or historical institutions, such as the art museum, traditional instruments, or the laws of harmony, and so on. In short, I think the performance is the most primitive one. Each medium is the restriction of this radical action, and those restrictions construct a bundle, and this bundle makes a multiplicity. So that would be the answer to the previous question. And then if you have more answers, feel free to type them in, and then I can read them off and incorporate them into this conversation. I was also wondering, Siravith, thinking of the trombone, and lots of your work seems to look at the brass instrument as a resonator. I saw some stuff where you're mimicking maybe overtones in different gong-like instruments. I was wondering if you could speak about that a little bit, and how that might be put into different formats like performances, lectures, and so on.
Thank you for talking about my previous work. it's about the I explain like the starting point of that work is start from the interesting in frequency. As a Thai instrument, they have a very specific tuning system, and even each instrument has a completely different tuning system. So I got this idea, and I would like to transform dash each frequency for each gong, each note, and perform it on trombone in terms of the interval and harmony, like to find out what is the is it getting will it get a new sound or new functional harmony. And I found out that when you use this kind of frequency combined together like interval or three notes together, and firstly I experiment with the electronic device such as a drone, or first to realize how beating it is, how sound it will be, and then I transform it by playing at the same time with the drone to figure out that if you use these two frequencies and perform with the true trombone together, does it sound different from the electronic device? Yes. And from that point, I found out that it creates a new sense, new thing. When compared to the tuning system like just intonation or equal temperament. And I think there is this kind of possibility when you have a much more developed in electronic or technology nowadays.
And so has that also affected your playing, right? If you I'm even thinking of something like playing in an orchestra, right? Like the classic spectralist move. You're no longer playing harmony, but you're playing timbre. And maybe that affects how you shape the sound and what you produce on your instrument, maybe.
I have to confess that after I did that experiment with my students, because the frequency is very slightly very small distant and very specific. So, and when compared to the trombone, we have to adjust sliding a lot. So somehow is open up the sense of audible for us as well. But if you take time in that area so much, you might I feel like I lost some confidence about playing exact pitch when playing together. But this thing I think is very important as a human, because as a human we cannot play as precisely as as a computer or as a machine. And this is very interesting, because if we have a risk, we have a mistake, we have a exciting moment, and that I think is kind like a more artist or artistic more than the the piece of machine composition.
Cool, great. Also, I'll say this ahead of time. Masafumi, I wanted to ask you what your piece in this festival is, what maybe listeners can expect, the piece that you will have performed. Maybe you could type that while I ask this next question, and then I could read your answer. I believe Hell was in the title of it. So I'm curious what it is, what we have in store for the performance. And then Mauro, I wanted to ask you, I saw a piece of yours with the double bass, and it made me think of treating instruments as resonant bodies. The reason I thought of that was seeing the performer, like the opening, the performer's hand moving on the instrument, tapping it, the way like if someone gave me a bass drum, I would maybe tap it and see what sound it makes. maybe I'm off on my assessment of the piece. So if I am off, I would love to know how I'm off and what kind of musical thoughts are going on there from your perspective.
Yeah, I would love to contradict, but it's very much that, yes, and even more so, I think, than you might know from this piece. I think the piece you are mentioning is called Slope Motion, that I did with John Heilbronn, and that has been performed by others now, but it's down to him also that we made these techniques, and it's mostly techniques of his that we used, that he was mastering before. So yes, but it's very, sorry?
Is that the performer?
That's the performer, yes, John Heilbronn. He's also a composer, and he's also in Berlin. I've been working with him for quite a while, and he just is, he's incredible to work with, very easy. I just basically had to put my Zoom and afterwards just kind of collect everything and order it. But so yes, it's very much thought as a musical body that is on a slope, and is kind of always slowly kind of almost falling over, so you have to make a step. This kind of idea that you're just kind of slowly moving downstairs. And weirdly enough, I'm working on a double piece for double bass solo right now, a very quite big piece for Florent Tangino of Musikfabrik Cologne for next year, with the Wayamont Foundation. And there it's all about a resonant body. It takes it even more explicitly, that with text, where the text, a bit like in My Social Muscle, the text is a reflection about this body of the double bass, but also what is a musical body in the concert space. And in this case, it's this idea that it's a musical body that can eat all the atmosphere of the room. It can eat all the guilt, a bit like a Catholic priest. It can eat all the guilt of the people that are sitting in the room, that have all sinned against the environment, against the atmosphere, against the people around them. And the double bass becomes this earth eater almost, that can compact this and make bricks out of this material, and those bricks become the pieces that make up the work. So it's kind of the short version of it, but it's very much the double bass. It's quite obvious it's a big body, and it's resonating, and it has this whole unique connection to the room and to its performer, who is mostly smaller than its instrument, a bit like the organ or something. It's a weird one. But I wanted to ask you actually, Miles, a question, because I feel like in one of your pieces I've seen, which I liked a lot, it felt to me very similar. I think it's also with a double bass. It's a string study, number 2 I've written down, correct me if I'm wrong. And you have 4 people around the body, and they make like kind of symmetric movements, sometimes counter-symmetric, and then sometimes out of symmetric movements. They go in parallel movements and all of this. And one thing that for me was very important in this piece you mentioned, Slope Motion, was the kind of the sound is limited by the motion of the body, or of the body of the double bass. Like kind of in my case, when I throw the bow, or when the player throws the bow on the strings and they kind of rattle down and make this butterfly-like sound, the sound ends once it's at the bridge, kind of like, or then it changes. So it's kind of a natural, like there's no way how he can make it go on once he's there. And in your piece, I thought what I find great about it also is that all those movements that they do, they're kind of like limited by their body, and the length of them are determined by the limits of their bodies. So I don't know if that was a thought that went into it, and if yes, is it also something in your other pieces, especially, for example, when you work with electronics, which you do, I think, which the pieces I like a lot too. But there it's less evident to use the end of the body, because you can go in infinity, right, with electronic music. So how do you connect the two, and or am I wrong about that you do that?
Yeah, no, it's correct. And yeah, so that one was the 4 performers around the double bass. I was largely thinking of the physical movement and the choreography between them, so the type of visual imagery that they create together. And then sound is sort of a secondary result from that. The question of time in that was a big one that I had open, and because I didn't want to notate it in like a, quarter note equals 86, and then you have to have this metric thing. But I also didn't want to do the thing where you write like 45 seconds and then bracket, and then all the, people are counting seconds, which is still kind of this metric feeling. So what I did in that piece was I had very extreme tempos, like quarter note equals 2 or quarter note equals 3, just to indicate a general time frame without saying seconds. And then I would do rhythms within the beat of that. And then in that sense, there's also a note to view it as a fluid time, almost like an indication of phrases. So for example, then one phrase would be starting your arm here and then putting it all the way out and letting that movement dictate the kind of actual length of that phrase. If I may return a question really quick, in our final time, maybe we want to focus on the pieces coming up. I was wondering, my social muscle, there's like a fitness theme in it, something about yoga, the gym. In my mind, I thought of Hollywood, combining those things. I don't know. I was wondering maybe you could speak briefly on what is coming up with that and what that theme might be for the people who are going to see the piece, whether in person or online.
Excuse me. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's so as I briefly mentioned, there are like 4 performers on the woodblock and 1 on the megaphone, and the one on the megaphone is this kind of instructor or guide, and they have a mix of language. It's a text that I kind of created with transcribing YouTube videos, which are yoga lessons, which are gym instructors, and also from photo shoots, professional photo shoots. And I kind of transcribed from them and made a text with a mix of a language of all of them. And I think you can imagine what it sounds like, right? The gym instructor being quite tough, giving very clear advice, and then kind of pushing, whereas the yoga teacher is more kind of finding a language more soft and so on. And then I tried to find a kind of a language choreography between those. And the idea is that all of them, be it yoga teacher, be it a gym teacher, they all serve to train you as a person in something that you might afterwards use as social capital to, I don't know, on Instagram or when you talk to friends, like, hey, I went to the gym today, or hey, I'm doing yoga every morning. It's a sign of status. It's a sign of and yes, in this sense, Hollywood is kind of the first one to use it or to make it kind of big. They're kind of starting the trends, and now it's kind of whole upper middle class and higher are like kind of doing this stuff. And I just wanted to take it very, very literally, probably too literally, and put it in a piece of music, but make the language kind of not dumb, but try to keep it poetic. And the more the piece progresses, the more weird the language becomes, and the more also it drifts off into more poetry and more a poetic language. And also the constellations between the musicians is not just 4 executors against 1 guide anymore, but there is a walkie-talkie connection between 2 of the performers, and it becomes more dispersed. The other people start to talk, they start to sing. Then at some point the whole kind of constellation starts to talk, so the sentences now go through all of the performers. So it just becomes a more weird and more maybe a distorted kind of relationship between all of them. And that's I hope that answers
yeah, that's great.
more or less the question.
Be there in person to see it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Yeah. I also have a message from Masafumi here about his upcoming piece. So the title is Hell of Light. And the message or program about it reads, the light covers up every kind of the essence violently. Harsh, brilliant sounds last through the whole work and the video part. I use Heidegger's text, then here I'll speak German. Die Frage nach der Technik. Is that, what is that? The question?
The question regarding the technique?
Okay, the question regarding the technique, which deals with the concept of essence. But this text is also covered with various expressions of light, so we cannot see the essence. The light is a violence which reveals everything and also covers them then. This work consists of various lights, expressions, and composing of sights like hell. So it seems to be a extremely engaging, intense work that I look forward to seeing on that live stream there. I'm also wondering, Siravith, if you want to speak about any of the upcoming or previous performances, and what it's been like for you playing the pieces, maybe what people can expect.
Yes, there is one piece from composer named Jean David Caliud, the French composer. He is living in Bangkok as well. His piece is about the interaction between multimedia and player, and he noted my part to to prove the audience that we are human. We still are human by I have to communicate with the audience talking and eye contact, or have a have a relationship with the audience in terms of producing sound, producing words, and at the same time there is a conversation from the multimedia as well. Also, we did some piece from your the 30-second piece. It was very interesting because we have to really pay attention and really produce what we can synchronize with your multimedia sound very precisely, and that is very challenging and very interesting to make the sound that we produce consistent and synchronized at the same time. Yes, I think from my part is mostly on about reaction and awareness of playing together with the multimedia, and also to imagination that imagine the sound that we can produce besides from the ordinary playing, just blowing, and we can create so many things from trombone, and that's what the part that human can deal with that.
Yeah, cool, fantastic, and thank you for your playing earlier today on my very short multimedia piece. I can say for that I had a sound installation, which I believe is playing throughout the day in one of the locations that works with contact microphones and loudspeakers, and the sort of physical feedback when contact microphone hits a loudspeaker, the loudspeaker moves to produce sound and bounces the contact microphone off. So I wanted to do something with the installation in combination with instrumentalists, but given the contemporary circumstances and stuff, I thought, okay, a video of the installation with instrumentalists, and then it became a exercise in seeing how condensed I could pack everything in there and experimenting with different lengths and mediums with that. I have one more message from Masafumi here as well, so I'll go ahead and read that. And it is that he does not like to use an interactive system, a system which is prevalent among media art, because the system may strictly restrict the expression of music and visual content. In an interactive system, both music and visuals are mixed into only one dynamic. But another in like audio-visual expression, they're treated as parallel it can have two different dynamics. And it is these two different dynamics that make a rhythm. So in short, he's trying to create a multiplicity of these different dynamics, and how those probably play out and operate in that format. So I think we're about out of time here. I don't know if anyone has any final questions or thoughts, or if anyone knows what time their works and pieces are happening. Maybe you should go ahead and say those if we have any listeners. I'm sorry, I don't know the schedule off the top of my head, but it seems like a pertinent thing to say.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually have to check too, because I think I have the time in Thailand, but I have to calculate for here. I do have a question, actually. How much time do we have?
I think that we are just about out of time.
Okay.
But we can go. Oh yeah, okay. I just got a message. There's a performance coming up, so we need to wrap it up here.
Okay.
But thank you so much. It was great to meet each of you and to Siravith, to speak with you again.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing all your works. Masafumi, I'm sorry about the audio. I'm sorry about the audio with that, but hopefully.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that will be my son. He's gonna listen to the performance also.
Oh, great, fantastic. Okay, so on that.
He snuck in the room. Yeah. All right. Good luck with the performance. Thank you so much for having us part of this.
Thank you.
It's super exciting. And Toy, good luck.
Thank you.